Well, I got called to replace the shanks on this bucket, and when it originally came in, I see that it had been replated. It had already been replated from right here to the end, and that was good still. That plate's very thick, good shape, no problem there. The only problem I noticed, or not really a problem, but something that took a little time, is the way this was originally done. When they plated over this, they welded this area right here completely full of weld. So when I went to cut these shanks off, it was quite a bit more work than normal to remove that shank, because I had to cut completely through that plate just to get in here to make the cut to cut the shanks loose. The cutting edge was mentioned at that time when I first got the call. The cutting edge was very wore on the back side, but of course it did have this extra plate right here that I reused. I just had to cut a little bit more than normal to get in there and get them shanks off, just because of the way that it was filled in so much with weld. So what I decided to do, so that these shanks could be a little more replaceable, I decided to cut enough of that plate out around here that I could weld that shank down to the cutting edge underneath here, and weld that plate to the cutting edge underneath there, and do that welding individually. That way, if one of these shanks needed replaced, it wouldn't be quite so much cutting to get into the weld to get it off there. Now, there's still plenty of weld in here. These shanks are very, very beveled when you get them, and there's lots of room to put plenty of weld behind them. So no problem there. And I think with good teeth on it, I don't think you'll have a major wear issue where this really needs to be filled completely in. I'm sure when they welded that full, they probably thought they were doing something good for wear, and maybe so. But I think this is going to be fine to not fill that completely full, and it certainly makes it a lot more maintainable, I would say, I guess, if you need to remove one of these shanks and replace it. Then the next part of this that involved the shanks and the cutting edge repair had to do with obviously welding all these in the back, but also where the original back side of this cutting edge had worn quite a bit. I've cut out and plated that with hard ox plate, and there were some cracks found. And I arc gouged all those cracks out and repaired them. There was a wear plate on the back of here that there was very little left of it, just slivers. So got a new hard ox plate and put that on there. And when I was welding this hard ox plate on here at the top, there was a couple areas where the heat from my welding, I was able to actually blow through. And the reason why is because right behind here, the plate that they plated over was quite thin, and I think they tried to do something about it, adding that weld in there, which, you know, it gave it at least something. But what I did in order to repair that, when I realized how thin that plate was behind the plate, I penetrated completely through there to the replate on the inside, and I've plug welded that on there in a few places. Right there. Right there. There. And there. And you might say, well, they had that thing welded completely full of weld, you know, between that huge plate and that tooth, and it was filled clear full. How could that crack? Well, the thing is, we don't know that that wasn't cracked and hadn't been cracked all along, and it very well could have been the reason that the last welder just decided to weld that completely full weld. He may have saw those cracks and said, well, I won't have to worry about those cracks if I fill this thing clear full of weld. So then the next thing that come up with this was the side cutters that were on this bucket. I saw that the side cutters that were on the bucket were in really bad shape. There wasn't much left on them. I contacted a guy I know with Cleveland Brothers, and I asked him if at that time if it'd be a problem to get those and new bolts, and he said, oh, no problem. I could get them for you pretty quick. And then after I'd spoke with them at Cleveland Brothers, I got a hold of my job contact that brought me the bucket, and I asked him if he'd want to replace those side cutters. And we talked about the fact that operators that are really trying to move a lot of dirt really like those side cutters because they make it scoop, full scoops. The only time guys don't like the side cutters is whenever you're trying to make a narrow ditch, because they actually make the bucket dig a little wider. Now my job contact said, if you can get the cutters replaced, let's replace them, because they want to move major dirt with this thing. And he mentioned, you know, they can wear out a bucket on one big job. So at that point I contacted Cleveland Brothers and got the new side cutters coming this way. Now, when I put the side cutters on, what I realized, one of the things I noticed right away, is there was a big void in behind that side cutter. And I'll show you that. So when I saw that big void behind that side cutter, I made the decision on my own to take some hard ox plate and fill that in back there, so the rear flat spot of this cutter is sitting against solid iron where the side of the bucket had worn away before. And this brings us up to something where, you know, I said in the beginning of this, when I spoke with my job contact, you know, it's tough to price stuff like this. I don't know what it's going to take to do it, but I'm gonna work on it, and I'm gonna do what I think's right. You know, based on the things you tell me. But what's really difficult to do for me is to get something like this and be working on it and have to call the job contact every time I see something that's not right. You know, if I find a crack and I have to call and say, hey, I found a crack, would you pay me to gouge it out and weld it up? Hey, I found a void behind this side cutter. If I put it on there, we're only going to be relying on the bolts to hold it, and that's not right. Can I fill that in with some steel? You know, and then call again and say, hey, I found a thin spot. This steel right here is too thin. Is it okay with you if I fill it in? I just decide, you know, I get a general idea what the customer's going to do with the implement, and I've just got to go. I just got to work on it. I got to fix it. You know, if I've done something here that is unauthorized, that you don't think it was worth me doing, then I have very detailed notes on what I've done and the time it took. And if there's something that I've done here that you don't want me to do, you let me know and I'll take it off my bill. I don't want to hesitate when I find something that's wrong and I already know that a customer wants to take this implement and put it to work and not have trouble with it for a while. So, you know, I'm going to do what I think's right to make the implement ready to work. And, you know, obviously nobody can make one of these things last forever, but I don't want you to have trouble with it really soon. So then the next thing I noticed on this bucket when I was looking at it was in behind where this wear plate had been added from here back. There was a lot of really weird looking welds in here and places where little spots had been welded, and it just made me curious. So what I did, I took a torch and started cutting some holes. I cut a hole right here because I know this is an area where you're going to see very little wear, and that would tell you a good idea of what the thickness was of this plate that went all the way around. And then I noticed right here there were dents, quite a bit of dents in this bucket, and these buckets generally don't dent that easy until they start to wear thin. But I'd cut a hole right here in this bucket, and I found a spot that was less than 1/4 of an inch. In my opinion, way too thin for a bucket this size. Well, as you can see, after seeing what I did looking at that, I rebuilt this from here to there. Cut it out, cut off the wear bars off the back, which the wear bars were in really good shape. Rebuilt that liner, put a bucket liner in from there to there, and then welded the wear bars back on the back side. So after I replaced that section of the bucket, all new hard ox plate from right here all the way down, and tied in where the area where the bucket had been replated on the inside previously, welded all those wear bars back on, and then I realized I needed to address some cracking and some wear on the corner where this bucket was coming apart. There's a crack right there where it's worn through this side wear plate. That's the kind of thing I wasn't able to see that. But obviously, you know, the heating and working right here and a little expansion and contraction, and it shows right up. So on the corners of this bucket, I cut hard ox blocks, welded on at the end of each wear bar. I hard faced those blocks here on the outside, and I welded up in between those blocks in places where I'd found cracking. And now it's done. I think you got a bucket here that's every bit as good as a new one. I know there's no thin spots in it. I think the bucket is considerably thicker than what you would get if you were to buy an aftermarket bucket of this type. And my materials and labor on this, if you were to pay my regular rate for labors and material, I'm coming in about probably $2,000 or more less than what you could buy an aftermarket bucket for. So let me know what you think on it. If you're happy with what I did and you're okay with me turning in all my time and materials on it, let me know. If there's something here you got a problem with, you ain't gonna hurt my feelings. You know, I took a lot of initiative here, and maybe I've done some things that I shouldn't have done. You just let me know. I want you to be happy.